Welcome, everybody, to the 24th stream of DBB Live. Hope you've all had a great day so far and are ready to talk some Detroit basketball. I'm Wes Davenport from Motor City Hoops and Detroit Bad Boys, and I am joined, as always, by the Aussie himself, Jack Kelly for Detroit Bad Boys. Jack, how you doing today?
I'm good, Wes. I'm good, man. As always, we're feel like we've been saying this every week for the past month, but we're finally getting really close to the real stuff. We've got media day next week, so yeah, the real stuff's almost here, and we've got a guest on today, which I'm also excited about. So yeah, man, ready to
Yeah, I
go.
was about to say. Speaking of the real stuff, we couldn't be more excited here to be joined by the leader of DBB himself, Sean Court. Sean, welcome back.
About the Pistons Frontcourt, the
So
most
you're
exciting
muted
part
for
of
the
the
first half of
roster.
that. Sorry, one more time. You're muted for like the first half of that. That's my fault.
I was just saying I'm excited for discussion about the Pistons Frontcourt, which is obviously the most exciting part of the roster.
That's where they got the most players. Some might say, Jack. Some
Yeah.
might say. But first, before we get to that, why don't we touch on maybe some more at least shocking news? You know, maybe it's not fun for Pistons fans who are hoping to make a play in or a playoff run, or at least a run to the playoffs this year. But obviously, some big news drops yesterday. Damian Lillard's going to the Milwaukee Bucks. They're both bolstering up their championship level roster. You know, Sean, just wanted to get quick thoughts from you. You know, what was your opinion on it? How do you value what they gave up versus getting back Damian Lillard? And from a Pistons perspective, is there anything, I guess, team building wise that might be worth watching for this? Be that players that were involved in the trade or just some strategies in general.
Well, my take on the overall trade initially is I love Damian Lillard as an offensive player. I love Drew as a two-way player. And so when you're talking about a Bucks roster that's already competing for a championship, my mind immediately goes to what's the playoff scenario like? And is Damian Lillard such a minus on the defensive end in a playoff setting that you don't really get to maximize the benefit of having him? It worries me a little, but he also just provides so much playmaking and individual scoring prowess that it makes them better. But I am worried about sort of what do the Bucks do if they hunt Damian Lillard on the defensive end in a playoff series where the opponent has three good scoring options on the perimeter, and you can't really just stick them somewhere and hide them.
Yeah, for sure. That's the first thing that came to my mind. And then like I personally think like Damian Lillard, regardless of their defensive stuff, just makes the Bucks a little bit better. I mean, they still have Giannis, they still have Brook Lopez, albeit at 35 years old, sort of on the back line there, protecting the paint. But offensively, like Chris Middleton as well, he was pretty injured last season, felt like he was in and out of the lineup at times. So, I mean, from a Pistons standpoint, I'm just going to throw it back to Sean here. How did you feel does this sort of, I guess, impact the rebuild, or in the next 2 to 3 seasons, do you see this affecting, the Pistons in terms of like they're in the Central Division together? What sort of impact on Detroit do you think this has, if any?
I mean, I think it makes Milwaukee a contender for several years. So you would hope that the Pistons are good in that same window where the Bucks will still be good. I never really thought Giannis was a true threat to leave because they were going to do something to keep him, and they just did it. So, get used to him for probably his whole career. More immediately, I guess it does take the Bucks out of the race as possible landing spots for Bogdanovich. If the Pistons were looking to move him to a contender, the Bucks did seem like a good possible landing spot, but now they literally have no picks they could possibly send Detroit, and that's what Detroit would be looking for. So, cross them off the list. But, you know, they're on different timelines, really. They're on different competitive planes. So even if the Pistons are good, they're not championship level good in 2 years. They're, feisty playoff team good.
So, you're talking there about, I guess, trades for Bojan. You could probably throw Burks into that as well, and Milwaukee now being crossed off that list. Kind of wanted to throw this to both of you guys. I mean, is there a world where Phoenix may have acquired a guy that they would be willing to flip for Bojan if they could add picks to it, or Burks as well? Well, not as well, but alternatively, because they did get a lot of players there, and I believe they're going to have to cut down that roster too. So there might be some wiggle room there if there's anything of interest.
I did look at it just to see kind of how that scenario shook out, because I was looking at, Phoenix's depth is not as strong at the big man position. Here's the problem. Phoenix has such a top heavy roster. It has like 3 guys making $45 million and everyone else making $3 million or less. So the only way you could route anybody the Pistons would want to give up, which would be, Wiseman, Bagley, something like that, Bogdanovich, you'd have to start concocting really bizarre 3-team scenarios, 4-team scenarios to make the money work. So it's not easy, even if there is sort of a roster fit or a skill fit with what the Pistons are looking to have less of and what Phoenix might need more of.
Yeah, I just had a quick look at the roster there. The only guy that really jumps out to me is maybe Nasir Little from the Blazers. I mean, he's a wing. He's making 6.2 million this season. I don't know that, but I don't know what the deal would be. As Sean said, their roster's so top heavy in terms of salary. It's kind of hard to envision a trade with. Yeah, I don't know. Wes, was there anyone that popped out to you?
Same as you, really. The only name was Little, and I think the catch with Phoenix outside of the salary stuff is, like I mentioned, I believe they are over the roster limit. They're going to have to cut things down before we hit into a training camp here. So in order to, kind of concoct those salary matching deals, the Pistons can't be sending anyone else out, which I think kind of makes it difficult. At least in that case. So, I'm really not sure if there is a match, but if there's a way to swing it, I do think Little would be a guy I'd be at least interested in. I look at him more as a small big than a big wing, but that's kind of splitting hairs at that point.
Yeah, for sure. YouTube user here throws out Killian Hayes for Nasir Little, which I'm sure
You'd rather
Killian
have
might come
Little?
up later in the show. If he's Killian part of the front
doubt
court,
about
maybe we
that.
can talk about him.
I was also wondering if the Bucks would be interested in a player like Killian Hayes, just a defensive only point guard to spell somebody like Damian Lillard just for matchup purposes if they do run into problems. Because, I mean, Killian is light years away from Drew Holiday, but they're going to miss Drew Holiday. And so trying to fill a gap with what defense he offered in some small way, I mean, if I was a Bucks fan, I'd be looking to plug that hole just a little bit.
It's not a bad idea at all.
Speaking of Drew Holiday, I don't think this is very realistic at all, but is there a universe, a world somewhere where the Pistons would consider Drew Holiday, trying to take him from the Blazers in some way?
I mean, I'm sure the Pistons would consider it, but that would require the rebuilding Blazers to want things other than picks, because that's the one thing the Pistons can't really afford to sacrifice. Like, in a world where the Blazers wanted some veteran depth to help their young core, they would probably just keep Drew Holiday instead of Burks and Bogdanovich. But like, other than that, what are you going to give up? The young players you're building around, or the future picks you can't really afford to sacrifice?
Yeah, I was going to say the same thing. I mean, in order to get Holiday, you'd be giving up like Ivy or some other young guy, and I'm just not really sure that that's worth it considering Holiday's age. I mean, the idea of Drew Holiday next to Cade Cunningham is pretty sweet, but I just don't think there's really a match there.
Yeah, for sure.
So, Jack, if you want to jump into the big men here, I mean, you've been teasing it with us. I know that Sean's been waiting all week to talk about this big man rotation.
Well, I thought we had to bring in Sean for this one. So, as we did on last week's show, we hit on the backcourt and sort of just went through each player and just got some thoughts and what our expectations might be for them in the upcoming season. So, I've put a list together of all the centers, power forwards, and I guess small forwards. So I'm going to go through each name. I might just go back and forth between each of you. And if you feel obliged to offer some comments on a player you weren't asked about, feel free to jump in. So I'm going to start here with Sean. And Sean, what are your expectations for Isaiah Stewart in the upcoming season?
You started with a tough one. What are my So I think that he is going to take a step forward as a perimeter defender because I think he has the skill to do it, just not the experience. So he's going to get used to what it means to move his feet and to navigate the screens and to switch even more than he has throughout his career, where he's been more kind of conditioned in that center role. So I think he'll take legitimate steps as a good, big perimeter defender and can do some of the things he also did inside. So you're going to love that. He's still not going to be able to score inside. He's still going to be a sort of okay rebounder, but not great. And then the big question is, how does he get his offense? Because you need him to provide some offense for the team. And so he needs to be a high volume three that hits 37% or better. And if he can do that, he can be a plus player. If it's much lower than that, then it remains like, what is he really providing in this grand scheme of things? Because he's not going to get to the line a ton, and he's not going to be able to score inside much.
No, for sure. And do you see, I guess, is he in your starting lineup for opening night? I mean, in terms of what are you predicting the coaching staff will do?
Yeah, I think that they don't sign him to that extension if they didn't have a clear understanding that they wanted him long term and they view him as a starter, at least in the first year or two of the deal. If they kind of get progressively better to the point that they have a surplus of starting level players, quote unquote, and can easily transition him to a versatile big off the bench, that's possible, but that's certainly not going to be the plan for this year.
Yeah, for sure. I think I'm in the same camp there. All right, Wes, I'm going to turn it over to a guy. James Wiseman.
I knew it was coming, and yet I'm still not prepared for it. So I would say my expectations for James Wiseman. Honestly, I'm still trying to figure it out. I'm not entirely. There's such a wide range for James Wiseman. I think there's like a 2% chance that if he like plays ridiculously well, like he could start over Duren, and that's wild. And it would take something that we've not seen out of James Wiseman before, and Duren probably playing poorly. But like, I don't want to take that off the table. At the same time, I could also see him completely out of the rotation. I think my reasonable expectation for him is, getting about 10 to 15 minutes as a backup center and hopefully not posting up. Like if we could just get that out of him, I think that's a big win for James Wiseman. And I'm not entirely convinced that we're going to get even that out of him. So remains to be seen. I'm personally, I'm giving him about the first month of the season. And if he plays really well, because I'm assuming he's going to play, if he plays really well, then we'll reevaluate where we sit with James Wiseman. And if he plays poorly, I think he probably needs to get pulled. So that's kind of where I'm at with him.
Yeah, for sure. And Wiseman's a pretty interesting topic. So, Sean, do you have any thoughts on James Wiseman?
My thoughts are pretty much in line with Wes's, but much less diplomatic, I suppose. I I don't want to see him on the floor. I don't think he's going to score effectively. I don't think he's very good. And the sooner the Pistons give him the opportunity to show that he doesn't deserve a spot in the lineup, the better. Because I think, in fairness to him, they traded for him to give him development time and minutes. That's why he played a lot last year. That's why he played a lot in Summer League. That's why they're doing the two big lineup thing. I think that they will make a determination that it's not working, and they gave him all the runway they could, and he's just not that guy. So they'll hopefully move on. If there's an injury somewhere in the league and somebody's desperate for a big, I hope the first phone call is taking anything you can get for James Wiseman and just moving on, because there's just no future there that I see.
Yeah. I think the only thing I would add with Wiseman would just be, like I see every now and then people talk about if he even deserves the chance, or that they gave up Bay, so they're obligated to give him the chance. I think the reason Wiseman needs to have a month, right, to prove whether he can do it or not, is because there is a whole lot of physical talent there. He's just not once in his NBA career tapped into it before. So, like, is it a long shot that it comes around? Yeah, absolutely. But I do think that just due diligence, you do need to at least find out if what we all think is true is true. So I do think that's probably why he's going to get those minutes to start the year. And I am with you. I think long term, he's probably not here.
Yeah, he's like the center version of Austin Day, where you could just see that Austin Day had talent and the ability to hit threes and an inability to play basketball at a high level. Like, he just didn't have the awareness or the reaction time. He couldn't put it all together. So the only scenario where it worked is if he was wide open and couldn't kind of overthink himself. And Wiseman can score. He's got athletic gifts, but he really sincerely does not know how to put together like competitive high level basketball.
I'm pretty sure both those guys have a ring though. So just want to throw that out there.
So does
Maybe they're
Darko.
doing something.
Oh, hey.
Hang on.
Pistons factory. They churn them out. They churn out champions.
Hang on. Austin Day, does he have a ring? Oh, maybe with the Spurs?
With the Spurs, yeah.
Yep.
That's right. Oh, man. Austin Day. Before I was ever a Pistons fan, I knew about him somehow. Maybe because on 2K he was like 6'10" and could shoot threes.
I mean, he
right.
looked great in college. It was so pretty in college.
Yeah. Oh man. All right. Let's move on. We're getting stuck on Austin Day here. Shout out to Pistons Talk as well. Thanks for joining us and everyone else in the comments. All right. Maybe let's hit on some fun players here. So, Sean, I'll throw it back to you. I'm interested to hear your thoughts on Asar Thompson and what you sort of project for him as a rookie.
So this is actually a fun one because maybe I'll be proven wrong, but I couldn't be more excited for Asar Thompson. I've loved every second of seeing him in Summer League and reading about him and reading his approach to the game, and even watching the Overtime Elite film, as kind of chaotic as that was sometime. And just living this reality as a Pistons fan of zero high-level two-way wings for so long. It's like I'm stranded in a desert and I found some water. It's just I want to drink all the Asar Thompson I can get. So I'm hoping he gets in that starting lineup right away. And if he's sort of if he's a player that is so good defensively and so athletic that even if he's lacking in some other skills, that he's a positive contributor, I think he can really redefine what the Pistons are able to do on offense and defense and how the rotations would work around him. So super excited for Thompson and think he can make a huge difference this year as a rookie.
And if we just go back a couple of months, what were your thoughts? Obviously, we did the draft night show and a bit of pre-draft stuff together. What were your thoughts pre-draft, I guess, on Asar?
I mean, it was hard not to like what you saw on film. And then it's also hard not to remember previous Pistons draft picks who didn't have a shooting profile, who you talk yourself into, and it never comes together, and it just short circuits a career, like Stanley Johnson, for instance. The advantage is that Thompson is so athletic and an above the rim player that he has more leeway to learn those skills over time. And also just the context. Like, I understand the transition from college basketball to the pros and what it usually looks like. I had no idea what overtime elite meant from like a 1-to-1 scenario. So I didn't know if it was all kind of fool's gold there, but it did not take long for me to see him in a setting with other professionals in summer league, even as that should be discounted. I'm just wearing my irrational off-season sunglasses right now. It was like, oh, this guy's making 10, 15 winning plays every quarter in summer league. Every decision he makes is the exact decision I want to see him make, and he's just doing so many great things. So I was skeptical, worried, / excited by the possibilities, and since moment one, I've been a true believer on this one. Once he started actually playing in summer league.
And final one on the side, do you see him in that starting lineup as well? Like, so we just touched on Isaiah Stewart before. We think he'll be in the starting lineup opening night. Do you see a starting lineup with Asad at the 3 and Stu at the 4?
I hope so, because I do think that defensive versatility can really dictate a lot of things and set a tone, and then Monty Williams can sort of mix and match things around that offense-defense balance. I think that it somewhat depends on how the bench unit fares on both ends, because if things start really not working out there, then they might need to just refigure the balance and move him to the bench to get more athletic or more defense, and then you're switching him in Bogdanovich or something like that.
Yeah, for sure. All right, we've got probably 4 or 5 players to get through here. So Wes, I'll turn it over to you and sort of your expectations for Jalen Duren.
I think he's going to end up being the starting center, and I'm hoping that we see some steps forward on the weak side rim protection. I'm not entirely sure that one's going to happen, so my more reasonable hope for him is defensive rebounding. He was a really, really good offensive rebounder last year. If he could shore up that defensive rebounding, a bit this season, I think that would go a long way just towards, obviously ending possessions. How many games did this team lose to last second tip-ins last year, right? Like, if you got a really, really good defensive rebounder, that goes away. So I'm really hoping that between him and then actually Sar too, who looks like a really nice rebounder, that issue may go away.
For sure. And I guess with Jalen, obviously we all know he's still 19 years old. Will be turning 20, I think, in December. Will you be concerned at all if he doesn't take a lot of steps forward defensively in his second year? Or is it more something in years 3 and 4? That's when you'll be starting to get concerned about the defensive end. The improvement doesn't come by then. Or hasn't, sorry.
I wouldn't say I would be getting concerned if he really doesn't take much steps this season. I don't think it's unreasonable to hope that he would take steps this season, though. So I guess it's kind of a worry spectrum, right? If after this year it's not a lot of worry, after the following year it's still not, then it's a little bit more and a little bit more as the years go on, right? Like, I think you could probably give him before the end of this contract that he's on, his rookie deal, before it's like, I'm really, really worried that he's never going to figure this out if he hasn't taken strides by then. But that said, he's got time to do it. He's got all the physical ability to do it. So, we'll see. We'll see how quickly he can pick up on stuff.
For sure. All right. Next player here, we have Isaiah Livers. Sean, thoughts?
He's such an easy player to root for, and also somebody where we haven't really seen it yet. I want to chalk that up more to injury issues that are sort of just keeping him at 80% when he needs to be at 100% as a young player. I mean, I believe in the skill set. I believe in the three-point shot. He puts it up pretty effortlessly. He knows how to work within a team context. So all of that is there, but when I see him play, he plays a little smaller than his size. He plays much more like a small forward than a power forward. So, and that might just be sort of developmental and also injury concerns, where he just doesn't feel like he can exert that kind of strength and effort. So I'm hoping he just continues that ascension and gets healthier. And if he can kind of put those things to rest, he's a solid rotation type wing big as a 3-4 that really helps you in a complementary player that has a lot of skills to fit in exactly where you need it amongst all other lineup combinations. And I think it's possible for him. We just really haven't seen it yet.
All right, next couple of players here. Marvin Bagley, Wes. How about instead of a preview, is he on the team before opening night?
Yes, I think he's on the team. At this point, I think he's on the team. And honestly, I don't hate the idea behind keeping him on the team just with the injury history that Marvin Bagley and James Wiseman both have. So, and actually a little bit Isaiah Stewart too. He's missed some time in both this season. So, don't hate it. I think he's on the team, and I don't really think he plays outside of injury replacement stuff.
Okay. And Sean, a quick hitter for you. Joe Harris, is he in the rotation opening night?
That's a tough one. I mean, with that 3-point shooting, he's gonna get some minutes in a Monty Williams offense. He's gonna get minutes. How they get minutes, who it's at the expense of, I'm not quite sure. But like, if he's healthy, he can shoot. And any team that's this bad at offense can use extra shooters. So I'll say he gets minutes.
I like it. Last player on the roster, Bojan Bogdanovic. Maybe I'll just turn it back to you, Sean, because we've spoken about Bojan a bit on the podcast. So, Bojan, what are your expectations for him for this season?
I think he's going to do exactly what he's done during his time in Detroit, which is be the most effective offensive player on the floor with huge defensive liability concerns that you have to sort of mold the matchups around him to make it work, because with Pistons' lack of talent overall in his time, he's basically a net neutral player because he's so good on offense, but he gives it all back on defense. That doesn't mean it's fated to be that way forever, but it requires the talent to level up around him, both offensively and defensively, so you can really maximize the advantage he gives you as a shooter and scorer.
For sure. All right. Now we've got some questions here we're going to dive into. Appreciate everyone for joining us, as always. Everyone who stuck with us throughout the off season. We really appreciate it. So we're going to get it going here with YouTube user who says, James Edwards III predicted a trade before the season starts. What is it going to be?
Sean, I know what I want.
The guest. If you know what you want, we want to hear it.
I would say the likelihood is probably they find some multiplayer deal. And if they find a multiplayer deal, it almost certainly is going to involve Killian, because he's just the odd man out. I think he's ready to move on. The team's obviously ready to move on based on the players they've added over the years. And I think in a world like the most likely scenario is it involves one big man at least. So either of Bagley or Wiseman. I don't know who wants either of them. Somebody who wants some efficient around the basket scoring could want Bagley if they see a really big black hole in their rotation. But I wouldn't expect any trade brings back actual value for Detroit. It's just sort of maybe a defensive-minded power forward, like more natural power forward, which is a bit missing on the Pistons rotation right now with very little depth. So I would say most likely is Killian. Second most likely is Bagley. Third most hopefully likely is Wiseman. And then at some point, somebody's going to want to kick the tires on Bogdanovic and or Burks.
For sure. So the thing I find really interesting with that sort of idea of moving Killian and one of the bigs is like, that's a lot of salary. Like, it's more salary than I think most Pistons fans would realize. In Killian, I think is, and he's going into his fourth season on around 7 to 8 million. Correct me if I'm wrong, but it's something around that. And then obviously Bagley's on 12 to 13 million. And I think Wiseman, being the second overall pick, is probably close to 10 million this season going into his fourth. So that's like, that's between 15 to 20 million in salary if you just combine Killian plus one of those bigs. So I don't know, Wes, if that is a potential trade package. I don't want to put you too on the spot here, but is there a player, or what do you think the Pistons could get back in return? Like Sean mentioned, sort of a defensive four, maybe. I just find it really interesting how much salary is there in that potential package. Maybe that's why there's just not a trade there.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Personally, I don't really think there's a trade there, just because of what you said, right? You're sending out a lot of salary for at least two guys who honestly probably just don't have a lot of interest around the league, right? Like it's hard to envision people being interested in Wiseman and Bagley. It's even harder to imagine people really interested in Killian Hayes right now. So if you're gonna find something, it's probably a salary dump. Something along the lines of a Joe Harris type player with about that much money on his contract that doesn't expire this offseason, right? You'd be getting rid of Bagley and Hayes for that level of player with a contract that you're definitely paying next season. I personally wouldn't really love that, but I think that's probably the most likely scenario if that's what you're looking at in terms of trading things out. I think my answer to the most likely trade, I mean, maybe this is a little spicy, but I think it's Alec Burks, only because Alec Burks is the most tradable player on this roster, especially if you're looking at a guy who, hopefully can get you something valuable back, right? Not just dumping him. There are probably countless teams that would be interested in the services of Alec Burks. He's not getting paid a lot, so you could probably get a rookie deal for it, or a rookie deal and a pick, something like that. You could get a little bit more creative and get more coming back, which would make it, more likely that the Pistons would agree to it if you could get more in return. So that would be my guess. I think he's the best trade chip they have per dollar. But honestly, I'm not sure there's going to be a trade.
And the thing that makes, if it's before the season, maybe the thing that is most likely is that there is a trade involving the Pistons, and the Pistons players in the trade don't even make the headline. So they're actually just like salary filler, depth filler amongst one of these mega trades, like a James Harden trade, where they're just trying to desperately look for teams that can help match salary for very convoluted deals. And with the Pistons probably not really wanting a huge or needing a huge return on players that are just sort of superfluous at this point, like a Bagley or a Wiseman or a Burks, lesser so, I guess. Maybe they're just thinking that one of those things will manifest before the season. Like they could have been, Phoenix if they weren't so desperate to get off DeAndre Ayton in this Dame Lillard trade, as just a very minor example.
Totally. I'm just going to get to the next question here from John. John's always got some interesting questions here, so shout out to John. He says, besides Harden, who causes drama this NBA season? Who's going to cause
it? It's in Dallas, right?
Probably with Luka, right? I mean,
Luka and Kyrie, like it could. I just don't see how they get along long term, and when things start to go south, it does not exactly bring out their best selves, and so it could get spicy down in Dallas if things don't start working out immediately, and people start looking for scapegoats. So I would say watch Dallas for a lot of drama this season.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
Maybe the Lakers, right? They always get a lot of media attention. They just added Christian Wood, so don't know how that's all going to go.
I forgot about Christian Wood. I was just gonna say, I don't know if you guys watched much of the World Cup last month, but I mean, we all knew Lucas sort of antics with the refs, but it feels like it's almost gone to another level, or maybe just the rest of the world got to see it to an extent. But yeah, I think Dallas is a really, really good pick. But also, West throws in Christian Wood there with the Lakers. We may as well
I'm
go
more
back
for
to
you.
this.
I mean,
Can I
Christian
just?
Wood isn't
I
important enough to cause drama
I,
in LA. Like they would just
I
say,
don't.
"All right, go home."
They're
Like
gonna
we
start
don't
him
want to
with
hear
that.
from you.
I really don't want to derail this stream, but where were you guys at the end of that 2019-2020 season with the Christian Wood stuff?
Uh,
I'm
since there's
just
receipts,
intrigued.
I guess I have to be honest, but I think my word, like my go-to line was, "Oh, Christian Wood is the most plug-and-play player in the league because of his skill set. Like any team would want him, so why not just re-sign him and then deal him?" And it turns out he's extremely toxic despite his skill set. So far from plug-and-play, because all he does is complain about his role and apparently not listen very well to his coaches or his teammates.
Yeah.
So I was off on that one. My evaluation was not quite there.
Appreciate the honesty, Wes.
I didn't care enough. It was so obvious that it was over, right? Like not with Christian Wood in Detroit specifically, just like the direction that team was heading was done. Like as soon as Troy Weaver showed up, and I wouldn't have been shocked if no one was brought back. And if my memory's right, not a lot were. So yeah, I didn't really have a thought on Christian Wood staying or leaving. I didn't care. It was ground zero. It's like
Yeah.
who cares? They'll do whatever they do.
Did you say you had another team for drama?
Yeah, I did. The Timberwolves. Gobert and
I
Cat.
like it.
I mean, Gobert can stir the pot a little bit. That could be funny.
Is he so marginalized though in Minnesota that even if he like raised hell, they would just be like, "Okay, whatever. This is obviously not your team, and we have other things to worry about. Like, go cry in the corner."
It's those dollar bills that make me think they'd get upset. They're paying them so much money.
And I guess the dynamic between Ant and Cat is also a little bit weird. And then Ant in general, just with that front court, like I know Cat's obviously like a shooting big man and isn't in the paint a whole lot, but just like I don't know, like we all saw Ant with Team USA, like just clear the paint for that man. Like so that's a good call. I was gonna bring up I think the Clippers are one to watch, not so much in terms of like drama, in the media and that, but more so behind closed doors, just with all these new rules regarding rest. And I still think teams are going to be able to manipulate those a little bit, but just seeing how that all goes down. And then, yes, YouTube user, you brought up my other one is the Houston Rockets. I actually didn't mind the moves they made this offseason because I think something I've learned watching this Pistons team is you can't just run out young guys consistently with no sort of veteran framework around them. So, but Houston is very interesting as well, for sure. Just with Dylan Brooks, I think Fred VanVleet's obviously like he's a veteran, but just the money they brought him in on, Jalen Green, just watching his development. So, yeah, Tari Eason even, he's sort of, there's just a lot there, a lot going on. Any other teams, players?
I see in the comments, John Buck mentions Memphis. I mean, one more catastrophic Joss season. Like, what do they do? Because they love him, they build a team around him, but I don't know. It could be messy in ways that makes everyone uncomfortable if things don't sort of sort themselves out in Memphis. And they also have a front office who's very aggressive and creative and forward thinking. So like if anybody was going to throw a grenade into their whole organizational plan because they just see the writing on the wall and do something radical, it could definitely be Memphis.
It's a good call.
I have a question just because I really like this question from John. On the Pistons, where do you think the drama could come from this season, if any?
Ooh.
Because I feel like that's something the past few seasons, since probably Christian Wood left the team, we haven't really had any drama apart from everyone goes back to that Hamidou Diallo sort of instance on the bench with Dwayne Casey. That's like the only thing.
Talk about, like,
I know, so minor.
Sign that there's no drama when the only thing people can bring up is that. I mean, if Killian doesn't want to accept his marginalized role as somebody who's trying to stay in the NBA and look for a new contract, he could cause some ruckus. But if they can't find a trade for him, they'd probably just release him and let him catch on somewhere, maybe. If there's serious drama, I think the only place it could come is from Bogdanovich, because he got traded there. He did everything they asked. He sat when they wanted him to sit, signed a new deal, partial guarantee. I think that was under the auspices of, like, I know exactly how you're going to use me. I know exactly what it's going to take for you to move me to a contender. And if it feels like they are not living up to the agreement that he was operating under, he could cause some drama. I don't think it's likely, but if it came from somewhere, it might be from there.
Yeah, you stole my two. I was going to say the exact same stuff. Yeah, nothing to add. Those are good.
I've got one. Team Bagley.
It could.
Team
I mean,
yeah.
You should just cash those checks and thank the Lord that he got a third guaranteed year. But you never know with people.
Yep.
For sure. Yep. If he's not getting minutes, I mean, I believe, was it his agent who put out that tweet prior to the season starting? He was traded to Detroit about the Kings essentially mishandling Bagley and his role. So
I think so.
Yeah, I believe that was the case. So that would be my pick. But I think,
and I think that's
defense. He was right
problem because his agent could be wanting to set him up for a new deal, and just like Bagley's agent was like, if we can't get him minutes, he's gonna be on minimums already, and that could totally derail everything. Now, I think, in retrospect, the Pistons might regret giving him a $12 million deal, and I don't think anyone in the NBA is gonna give Killian a $12 million deal. But the same premise applies where you're just agitating for minutes, a chance, and some production, because production gets you paid.
For sure. All right. That was a fun question. Thanks for that one, John. Next one from Mr. Jones. Speaking of Killian, if Killian's shot comes along this year, would you condemn the Dwayne Casey coaching staff swing as he trended down field goal percentage-wise the longer he stuck around? So is it Dwayne Casey's fault if Killian Hayes becomes a league average shooter also this season? Or improves his shot?
I don't know if Dwayne Casey is the one that hires the developmental staff specifically. And I think it's a Troy Weaver problem if there is such a lack of development that a new regime can bring in a perspective and maybe a couple coaches and totally transform a player like Killian. I don't think that's very likely, but I think that's on the GM to put the structure and the team around the development staff.
I would say no. So I think coaches and I think the staff and everyone in the front office, everyone puts way too much weight on what they do. Like, players get better. Coaches don't make players get better, right? So it really is. It's all on Killian, all that's happened so far. And that's fine. So the only thing that could really kind of come out of this, if he does turn it around, maybe he needed a different voice. And, like, no one's really at fault for that, right? Like, sometimes that's just a voice getting stale. You're hearing it for 3 years. You've been working on something, assuming that he has, and then someone comes in and says it a little differently and it clicks. Like, it's still on Killian, I guess, at the end of the day. So I wouldn't be putting any of the failures of, a Killian Hayes on Dwayne Casey's staff, and I'm not putting the success of Jaden Ivey's mid-range game on the coaching staff as well, right? It's really on these guys as players 9 times out of 10, at least in my opinion.
And I wouldn't say Dwayne Casey was the one champing at the bit to hire John Beeline as somehow the head of development for the Pistons. That seemed like a Tom Gores type thing. And also, it's not like Killian Hayes' shot was like, oh, you just need to work on it and practice it. Like, his shot is busted, and it's been busted since the beginning. So it required somebody to come in and force him to fundamentally remake his shot. And that's very hard to do because players don't want to take that step back. And we're living with the results because Killian still doesn't have a shot.
Yeah, and to your point, his shot looks the same as it did his rookie year. So, like,
I still see all
maybe the coach
twisties.
isn't saying it right, but it's still on Killian Hayes for not figuring this out by now.
Fisher, speaking of jump shots, I'm sort of jumping around here, but when you mention sort of the issues Killian has and how he hasn't really made much progression, at least from the 3-point line, do you think, like, do you have concerns with Asar Thompson's jumper long term? I mean, in terms of like it coming around at all? Because when I was at Summer League, I've said this a couple of times, but I watched him in the warm-ups, and it's not so much a form thing for me. Like, I'm never going to claim that I know what a good shot form looks like, but just watching the makes and misses, I was a little bit concerned, at least in the short term, about that shot.
Some loud misses.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm a Pistons fan, so of course I'm worried about a shot not coming along and derailing someone's career. That's all I know. But I think that he puts the work in. So this is kind of similar to my feelings on Jaden Ivey last year. There was a lot I was concerned about with his shot, but I knew he was sort of like the gym rat mentality, the son of a coach. So like he was going to put the work in and hopefully it would come around. And already last year under that Dwayne Casey regime, you saw Jaden Ivey's shot look a lot cleaner at the end of the year than it looked at the beginning of the year. So I am very worried about Thompson's shot long term, but I also know that if they can put a plan in place, he's going to put the work in and try to do it. So I don't think he's fated to be a terrible shooter for his whole career. And I also don't think he needs to be a 40% 3-point shooter to be an effective NBA player. So there's that little bit of wiggle room.
And I think that's a key thing to bring up in terms of, sorry, Wes, that I don't think he does. I don't think Asar does need to be that 38% plus 3-point shooter to be a really, really good player. Like Killian Hayes, he needs that 3-point shot because offensively, he's never going to get to the rim a ton and get to the free throw line. Like, that's just not been part of his game. So, no, I think that's a key point. So, sorry, Wes, I jumped in there.
No, all good. I was going to say the exact same thing that you guys did, right? I mean, if you're looking at Asar and you think that he, needs to shoot 36% to ever have the shot at being an all-star, then like, yeah, I don't know if you're ever going to really get that out of him, right? So I don't really think that he even needs much of a 3-point shot to be a really good, really valuable NBA player that's worth that slot that they picked him at number 5. So, like, I'm not worried about the shot only because I honestly don't expect it to be good this year, and I don't expect it to ever really be good long term. But if everywhere else in his game develops the way that fingers crossed it could, I still think he's a really, really good small forward, power forward combo. He's going to be a really good player if he figures everything out but the shot. So I don't really care.
Yeah, I'm going into the season telling myself if Asar is a 31% 3-point shooter, he could still be all NBA, all rookie first team. Like, he has the skill set to where if he has the minutes and the opportunity and the talent there, like, it's not going to hamper him from being effective on the floor and showing people what he can do and sort of growing into his NBA role and in his NBA career.
Yeah. And, you brought up Stanley Johnson earlier, right? Like, Stanley Johnson did not have a lot of the tools that Asar Thompson has. He didn't have the passing vision that Asar Thompson has. He didn't have the ball handling that Asar Thompson has. And this is all like day one stuff. And Asar's obviously an, you know, however many times better athlete than Stanley Johnson. That's Asar Thompson. So I just don't think it's really vital for him. And I'm with you too. I'm like, I think 31%. That's like my number for him this year. If he hits that, I'm like, wow, he exceeded expectations as a 3-point shooter for me. I'd be really excited.
For sure. I've just thought of an Asar question we can finish the show on. So
Nice.
I'm looking forward to getting your thoughts on that. But we've got a few more questions here to get through. So another one from John Buck, which shout out to John. If Miami falls off, how would you feel about Jimmy Buckets?
No. What? He revolted against the Minnesota Timberwolves because Cat wasn't good enough. I'm not sure that the Pistons are in a place where they're going to satisfy what Jimmy Butler needs in a team around him.
I wouldn't be comfortable giving up what you'd need to give up to get Jimmy Buckets on this roster. I think he'd fit really nice if you gave up absolutely nothing that you would really want to keep around on this team. But in order to get him, like you're saying goodbye to Jaden Ivey, you're probably saying goodbye to Asar too, honestly, because they would not have any interest in Duran. They've got Bam Adebayo. So yeah, I don't think that's happening, only because it's not worth what you'd give up.
Yeah, it's not just that Miami would decide to trade Jimmy Butler. It would be how many teams want Jimmy Butler, and you have to outbid them all. So that means you're paying a hefty price.
And I
Yeah,
think
Jack, this
Jimmy,
is like when we were talking about Siakam and Grant last week. It's like, yeah, if you just took those guys and dropped them exactly into this roster without changing anything else, it'd be great. But that's not something that you can do because you'd have to give up value to go get them. And then it ruins everything.
No, for sure. And I think the thing with Jimmy and like why he's thrived with the Heat is like he's an amazing player, and we've seen him now in 2 final series just do things that I don't think anyone expect him to ever do. Like, but just feels like you need a certain framework around him with your franchise. Like you need a steady culture, not to bring up the old Heat culture thing, but like him and the Miami Heat franchise are really a perfect match. And I would be hesitant to bring him into a Pistons organization that's really hit the reset button on a number of fronts. Obviously there's the past history, but they're not at the Palace anymore. Just they're trying to rebuild their entire culture. And I can't imagine just bringing Jimmy Butler there. I don't think that would be a good match at all. But I think he's an amazing player, and I can't fault anyone for wanting them on his team. I feel like him and Miami are such a perfect fit that I would have concerns going with him going to some other contending teams. I mean, we saw what happened in Philadelphia. Sean brought up Minnesota. So, yeah, fun question.
You need to bring Pat Riley with. You need to convince him to come be the assistant GM, and then it might work out.
Well, then you can rule out any cold weather city because Pat Riley's not going anywhere.
Yeah.
Detroit's warm, isn't it?
What? No.
Joking. All right. Sean J. Why do you think Bagley is benched over Wiseman? Do you think the Pistons could play Durant and Bagley together?
Oh, this is a Sean.
Sean's about to pass out.
Oh, I'm going grayer by the second just pondering this question. I think you play them together because for the Wiseman consideration, he plays because the Pistons want to give him every opportunity to show he should play or could play until they no longer play him at all. So, like, I wouldn't be surprised if he's the first big off the bench and he gets weeks to try and prove himself. And then once he kind of writes himself off that role, he's completely banished from the rotation because they're just giving him a shot, I think. And if it doesn't work out, they just move on kind of mentally and try and maybe move the contract if something pops up, because they gave it a shot. It was either 5 second-round picks or Wiseman. They chose Wiseman, and it didn't work out in that trade. From the perspective of Duren and Bagley together, that's not what I want to see, because neither can defend and neither has range beyond like 3 feet in an effective way. But I don't know what their plan is for Bagley otherwise. And the power forward rotation is so thin that I think you're gonna see some centers playing power forward quite a bit in Detroit.
Yeah. No, I think everything you said about Wiseman playing over Bagley. I mean, we talked about it briefly earlier in the episode too, when we were breaking down expectations for James Wiseman. He's so physically gifted that even though he hasn't shown any sense of putting it together yet, it would be a disservice not to at least make sure, that he doesn't put it together, right? There's maybe that 2% chance that he does, and then everyone looks like a genius, and we all ride off into the sunset and it's great. But that's not likely. So you're right. He's probably going to rule that out pretty quickly. And I think once he's out of the rotation, I honestly still really wouldn't think that Bagley's going to get a lot of minutes. I mean, I think you could pretty easily craft a lineup where Stewart's taking a lot of the backup 5 minutes, even if he's starting, as long as Isaiah Livers looks like a competent NBA player at that, combo forward spot off the bench. Also, Joe Harris can help out here. He has played some minutes at the 4. Like, I think once Wiseman is, out of it, wrote himself out of the rotation, as you put it there nicely, like, Monty Williams, Brady's brought this up a few times. Monty Williams doesn't really like playing two bigs all that often. So I think once Wiseman's kind of out of it, then you might start seeing, Isaiah Stewart shift and take a lot of those backup 5 minutes. So even then, like, Bagley's not getting time, So I think it's I'm pretty confident that Bagley's not going to play minutes unless it's an injury replacement this year. And I think Wiseman is, after about a month, going to fall into that same slot, right? Those two duking out the center 5 spot in the rotation, or, rotation.
And as far as narratives go, the addition of Monty Williams makes it very easy for you to sort of push aside these underachieving bigs and say, oh, it's not that you're terrible. It's just that Monty Williams has a different vision for the team than Dwayne Casey. So you're great, but you're no longer receiving any minutes, and we'll try to move you, even if that's not very likely. So good luck on your next team.
No, I love it. Yeah, I don't have many thoughts. I think you guys have summarized it perfectly. If we see Duren and Wiseman, that might cause me to take a break from Pistons basketball for a minute.
Whose 3-point shot do you trust more, Bagley's or Duren's?
Bagley's. Why?
Oh, Bagley.
Why would anyone trust Duren's 3-point shot right now?
Well, good Lord. Because they're both terrible. It was a trick question. You don't want either of them shooting any threes.
That's true. That is true. I would trust Bagley more to pump fake and drive, though, if you're going to have to stick him out there at the 3-point.
I would trust him to pump fake and travel.
At least he'd do it quickly. Wiseman holds it forever.
All right. Another one from Sean around Hamidou Diallo. Did Hamidou Diallo sign anywhere? I don't believe he has signed anywhere, but
no, he has not. He's probably one of those. They go into training camp, they see a hole on the roster for a 15th person. I mean, Diallo at this point in his career is basically like a utility infielder in baseball. It's just like somebody's going to need some of his skill set, and he'll sign for the minimum somewhere. So he's probably just waiting for like the team with the best chance of doing well, like an actual contender, or maybe he's just holding out for a path toward real minutes by looking at sort of how the depth chart looks. I'm sure he's had opportunities to sign somewhere at this point, and he's just sort of biding his time, because signing for the minimum now versus 2 months ago, like, there's no difference.
True. I'll just say this with Diallo. I would be if this were me, I would be very excited to bring him back and insert him as the backup power forward over just about anyone else on this roster. Also, at the same time, obviously, I've said it a million times. I would like to be starting Asar and Bojan, so that kicks Stewart to the backup five. If you could have a Bojan or Asar, whoever you think is going to be guarding more fours, take your pick, right? And Duran as your two starters in the front court, and then Diallo and Stewart off the bench. I would be very pleased. I'll just say that. I would have more faith in Diallo than Livers at this point, who is where he's the guy I've got slotted in that if I were to make an ideal rotation spot there at the backup four. So I like Diallo.
Whose 3-point shot do you trust more, Bagley's or Diallo's?
Diallo, because he won't shoot it.
You fell for it again.
No, Diallo does not shoot threes. He had that stretch last year, right? He took like 1 in 3 months.
And
that's why I trust him more, because he won't shoot.
God bless him. He knows his limitations. The one Pistons player that knows exactly what his skill set is.
Yes. They need
the thing with Hamidou, though, is like I was watching the Cade's highlights versus the Bucks last season, and there's this play where Cade like breaks down, like he has a pick and roll with I think Isaiah Stewart, draws like the help and everything, and he kicks this amazing cross court pass to Hamidou Diallo wide open in the corner. It is just like I don't know, man. I like Hami. Like I know his first season with the Pistons, I think I was very high on him, but yeah, I kind of tend to think he might have not been signed. I thought a lot of things were being held up by this Dame trade, so that's why maybe there's players hadn't been signed. I know Kelly Oubre only signed like quite late in the piece, just to throw out a name. So maybe I think Hamidou Diallo is an NBA player. Yeah, I don't really see a
Phoenix
spot
could cut down the roster.
Yeah, and it's OKC. I feel like you got to make some cuts. So I feel like there's a lot of roster maneuvering, at least in the back end of rosters, to happen in the next couple of weeks. All right, that does it for the questions. Sean, I do have one more question before we finish, but Sean, I just wanted to get your sort of, I guess, predictions for the Pistons season. I know we're still a little bit from training camp, a couple of weeks or so, but how are you feeling about the season? And yeah, what do you think is going to happen for Detroit, of course?
The Pistons will be bad overall, but I think they're going to be much more enjoyable to watch, and things are going to start flowing better to where the players are more often playing into their own skill sets and not trying to force themselves to do something outside of their skill sets. They've added diverse talents and enough growing talent that I think things are going to kind of slot in more organically into Cade taking a step up, taking less pressure, or taking a lot of pressure off Ivy as an athlete, taking a lot of pressure off Cade, Asur being the best basketball player who's ever lived eventually pretty quickly. And then Isaiah Stewart kind of within his limited skill set being effectively able to deploy those sort of niche talents he has in that defense and that toughness and that motor. And then Duran, I'm just hoping he's not going to be an all-star big, but he's already really good. He's still super young. So all he needs to do is all the things he did last year and take that little step forward on defense, and sort of the path continues there. So I don't think it's going to be as frustrating a watch. I think Monty Williams' offense is going to be much more advanced or sort of efficient than the Dwayne Casey offense. So it's going to be a more enjoyable watch for Pistons fans overall in that sort of high 20s, low 30s range at the end of the season of wins.
You know what that kind of team's called? I think that's awesome. That's where my hope is. But you know what that kind of team called? A league pass team. They're entertaining, but they're not good. Think of the Charlotte Hornets from like 3 years ago, right? Obviously, they didn't make anything out of it, but like, I think that's an awesome goal for this team. Just be entertaining while still being bad. Like, that's a win. That's a win for this team. You got to be entertaining but bad before you could be good.
And I would say like a personal goal for me this season is to see players on the floor who make Cade a better player instead of relying on Cade as a young player to be so good he makes everyone else better. Like, somebody on this team needs to have a skill set that makes it easier on Cade to be effective so he can advance and take that next step as a star in the NBA.
Love that.
Well, speaking of Cade becoming a star in the NBA, I wanted to get Sean's source, but Wes's as well, of course, on the four core pieces. Obviously, Cade Cunningham, Jaden Ivey, Jalen Durant, and Asar Thompson. Where do you rank them 1 to 4 as of today in terms of, how do you think when it's all said and done or in their primes, rank them 1 to 4, best to worst? I'm really intrigued because I think I know who number 1 will be, but I think honestly 2 to 4, you could ask any Pistons fan and they'll have a whole heap of different rankings. So yeah, Sean.
I mean, Cade's number 1, obviously. He can give you everything you need as long as he keeps developing as an offensive, efficient player. Number 2, man, that's tough. From an archetype perspective, I want to say Asur, because even with a limited skill set, there's so many things a wing like that can do well with playmaking skills that it's kind of easy to slot in as the second best player on a really good team with a really good career. If I was more confident in Jalen Duren's defense, I would probably say Duren is number 2. And then with Ivy, it's a question of, is he most effective as a lead ball handler or is he most effective as an off-ball player? If he's most effective as a lead ball handler, then he probably slots 4 in Detroit long-term, even if he's really good, because I don't think he'll ever be like an ace defender. But he's got all those other skills and you just want to maximize them. And maybe that can't happen if he doesn't have the ball in his hands all the time. So I would say right now, this offseason, before watching Asar Thompson shoot 26% from 3, we're going to go Cade, Asar, Duren, Ivy.
Okay.
So before I answer, let me ask, is this like, are we talking future value or for this season? Because Sean very expertly treaded that line right in the middle, and I couldn't figure out which one he was going for.
I was trying to go future, like long-term future,
Okay.
but thinking they would still be on the Detroit Pistons.
Gotcha. Okay, I'll do that too. So, like you said, obviously it's Cade. Cade's number 1. I would say in terms of like who's going to be the number 2 guy, it's probably Ivy, but I think the next most difficult to replace type of player would be Asar Thompson, just an elite athlete, defender who can pass the ball on the wing where almost everyone else has a ridiculously good scorer. That's a little bit more difficult to replace. So I would say he's probably number 2 in terms of, this team's value. And then, the next 2 guys, I have more confidence in Jaden Ivey being, reaching his ceiling than I would Jalen Duren at this point. I think both of them would represent an archetype where, they're probably pretty replaceable. Jaden Ivey, if he can become the scorer and that he might be, right? That 25, 26 point per game score is not irreplaceable, especially if that's like the only thing he can do, which looks like that's probably where Jaden Ivey's at. And then we all know how devalued the 5 position is. So I would probably go Cade, Asar, Ivy, Duren. But I think those last 2 are closer to each other than either of them are to Asar, if that makes sense.
Part of me thinks that Duren's lack of defensive ability right now is more with inexperience and age because he's so young. But like from an archetype perspective, think about how good Bam Adebayo is long-term and effective in the playoffs and easy to fit around with other players. Like that's the ceiling of Duren that I want to get behind. I just wish I had that ultimate faith in his defense. I think it can get a lot better, but if he could be a really good defender, then he's a great building block.
I'm actually more nervous about the offensive end on the Bam comparison for Duran, because coming into the league, like if you went back to Bam's high school tape, there was a whole heck of a lot of ball handling. Like he did a lot of this stuff back in pre-college times for him in his career, and then eventually it showed up in the league. Duran's never showed any of that, at least not to my
I feel
knowledge.
like I've seen sneaky good ball handling and decision making from Duran as a big. I think
As a
the
passer,
difference
for
is
sure.
how early in his life Duran became like an absolute beast. Like he was always destined to be a big man, even when he was very young, because he was just built so, he was built like a 26-year-old, probably as a 15-year-old. So
Yeah.
Yeah, Wes, I'm surprised with your rankings. You've come around on Asar, and I like it. And I think like
Well, it's because of the shift on value. Like when we were on the Pistons pulse and we were talking about who's going to be the number two, I still think it's Ivy. I just think a
yeah,
scoring guard's a little easier to replace.
yeah. No, I like it. I like it. Any final thoughts, Sean? Any final thoughts heading to the season? Obviously, we're going to get you back on a lot more regularly now. We're going to have real basketball to talk about. But
Yes.
is there any hot takes you want to fire off? Anything like that?
Oh yeah.
I think maybe Wes said this the last time I was on, but I think my hottest take is that there's going to be no moves in Detroit, and what you see is exactly what we're going to have as a roster to start the
I
season,
love it.
which is slightly depressing to me on various levels. Also, it's like the most static roster probably in the NBA, which is great. Thank you, Patrick. Thanks for reading. I'm trying to think of an actual hot take. I would say my hottest take will be that Bojan is on the bench to start the season.
I like it. I think that is a hot take.
Yeah.
So that would okay. Let's just leave it there.
I mean,
Finish our hot
I'm
take.
all in on Asar. Can't you tell? Like, you can't talk me out of it. Just
I love it. No, this show has needed some Asar love. Not to say that Wes and I aren't high on him, but it's been much needed. And hey, you got me excited. You got me excited for Asar Thompson. But thanks so much for jumping on, Sean. Obviously, anyone tuning in to DBB Live knows what you are and what you do, but tell the people where they can find you.
you can find me. I have wrested control of the Detroit Bad Boys Twitter account away from Elon Musk. So tweeting more from that account on X. I'm Xing more. You can follow me on Twitter on my regular account, Sean_Corp. Please read Detroit Bad Boys for all the contributions everyone makes to the site. We're about to ramp up coverage now that we're 27 days or whatever away from the season starting. So you're going to see a lot more coming up soon.
Thanks so much for jumping on, Sean. And thanks to my co-host, as always, Wes Davenport. And thanks to everyone for tuning in, all the questions. We somehow always get a number of questions, heaps of comments happening. We're getting close to the season, so we appreciate everyone's support throughout the off season. And yeah, we're finally getting to the real thing. So and special shout out once again to Sean. He's the man who makes this happen. He gives us this opportunity to jump on and share our thoughts every week. So until next week, go Pistons.
Go Lions.